The cramped apartment I lived in reeked of dampness and stale food wrappers, a constant reminder of how tight money had gotten. I worked shifts delivering food on my battered bike, dodging potholes and dodging angry drivers. Then came home to dive into freelance graphic design jobs I scoured online forums to find. I remember one night, exhausted and soaked from rain. I stayed up until dawn trying to finish a logo for a local startup, my fingers numb but refusing to quit. The thin walls barely kept out the sounds from the neighbors, the arguing couple next door, the creaky pipes, and the heater sputtered like it might die any second, leaving the apartment freezing through long winter nights. Still, I clung to a secret folder on my laptop filled with digital paintings and sketches I had been building over months, a private world where I was someone more than a failed delivery guy. I'd never told my family, I kept it locked away, afraid they'd just scoff at the idea. Family dinners were unbearable. I can still taste the burnt toast and cheap coffee that filled the small kitchen, mingled with the heavy tension that seemed to hang over the table like smoke. My parents owned a few convenience stores that had once been their pride, but lately I noticed empty shelves and dusty corners, customers skipping our stores for the new big box supermarkets that opened up on the outskirts. My dad would come home exhausted, his hands shaking slightly, and my mom, exhausted from trying to run a failing school, would snap at everything. At one dinner, my sister, dressed in a sleek dress she probably borrowed from her lawyer firm, bragged nonstop about a high-profile case they just won. The way she talked, so confident and sharp, made me sink further into my chair. Dad sighed so loudly, it felt like the walls were cracking. "Jamie, you're wasting your time," he said, without looking at me. "You should be helping out at the stores." I remember the exact tone, cold and disappointed, like I'd become a burden. Mom's voice cut in sharply. "We can't carry you forever." She didn't raise her eyes from her phone, but the weight of those words crushed me. I barely managed to keep my composure before I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly. I just walked out, my throat tight and my heart pounding. Outside, the cold air hit my face, but the ache inside was far worse. Later, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at my digital art portfolio. It held images no one knew about, portraits of faces I'd seen in the city, abstract cityscapes filled with hope and pain. I remembered the countless nights I taught myself new techniques, staying up while the world outside slept, the glow of the screen, the only light in the room. I didn't tell anyone about those hours, but they kept me sane. My mother's burnout was obvious, in her sharp words, and the way she would sigh deeply in the quiet moments, rubbing her temples like the stress was crushing her. I saw how tired she was, but her frustration often spilled onto me, turning every conversation into a battle I wasn't ready to fight. One evening, after a delivery, I saw my sister post pictures from a fancy gala on social media, laughing with expensive wine in hand. The contrast between our lives felt like a punch, but I closed my eyes and told myself they'd see me one day, not as the disappointment or the failure, but as someone who kept fighting, quietly building something real from nothing. I'd always been curious about Mr. Reynolds' garage, but it wasn't until one chilly evening that I realized something was seriously off. I was walking home when I noticed a black sedan pull up silently, its tires barely making a sound, on the cracked pavement. Two men in sharp suits stepped out, speaking in low tones. One carried a crate, wrapped in worn brown paper, the edges torn and stained. I caught a glimpse of strange symbols on the side, sharp lines, forming triangles and circles, like something from a secret code. It wasn't just decoration. I remembered seeing those symbols before in a faded history book at the library, the kind you'd expect in Cold War espionage stories. Curiosity pushed me to dig deeper. At the library, I found yellowed newspaper clippings hidden in the archives, articles with headlines like "Local Veterans Secret Service Uncovered" and mysterious artifacts linked to Cold War operations. One story described Mr. Reynolds as part of an elite intelligence unit involved in classified missions that never made it to public records. I read about rumors that he might have stolen sensitive documents or priceless artifacts during those years. The articles were peppered with eyewitness accounts. An old shopkeeper recalled seeing him meet shady characters late at night, and a retired police officer mentioned a forgotten raid on a warehouse tied to Reynolds. These details were too specific to be just gossip. Then came the night I snuck around the garage. When Mr. Reynolds was away, behind a pile of tools, I spotted a tattered journal with hurried handwriting. The pages were filled with notes about a hidden vault under the property, secured by complex puzzles and traps. One entry described a locking mechanism, triggered by pressure plates disguised as floor tiles. Another warned of booby traps set to catch intruders off guard. The handwriting trembled on the page, as if the writer feared discovery. It felt real, like a map to a secret no one was meant to find. One afternoon, I saw a delivery that froze me in place. A large metal chest was carefully unloaded, heavy, and locked tight. Its surface bore an insignia, an eagle clutching a key surrounded by stars that matched the symbol in the journal. Nearby, an antique WWI radio with dials and scratched paint was stacked beside it, both items handled with reverence. I remember the delivery man whispering something about classified equipment as he closed the garage door. The secrecy was palpable. Back at the library, I found the final piece, a worn folded map tucked inside a dusty book titled Reynolds Archive. The map detailed an underground network beneath our neighborhood, with tunnels and hidden rooms marked by the same symbols I'd seen on the crates and journal. Local landmarks were sketched with eerie precision, and one tunnel was noted as vault entrance. A faded note in the margin mentioned traps set decades ago to protect the contents. It wasn't just fantasy, this was history layered beneath my feet. That night, lying awake, I couldn't shake the feeling I'd stumbled on something dangerous but undeniably real. Each clue, the symbols, the journal, the chest, the map, pulled me further into a hidden world. The quiet hum of that garage wasn't just old equipment. It was a gateway to secrets long buried, and I was determined to uncover every one. I never expected asking Mia for help would pull me deeper into a mess I wasn't ready for. Mia and I go way back before she became the sharp investigative reporter everyone fears and respects. When I told her about the strange symbols on those crates, the cryptic journal with its coded entries, and the hidden vault under Reynolds' property, she didn't dismiss me. Instead, she pulled out a faded photo she dug up of Reynolds shaking hands with a shadowy figure wearing an old military uniform, proving he really had a murky past. But Mia's eyes had that cautious glint, like she was weighing if this story could make or break her career. She admitted how her editor was breathing down her neck for a big exclusive, even hinting she could sell the story to tabloids if needed. That made me uneasy. Trusting her was a risk, but I had no one else. Meanwhile, the family pressure was relentless. Dad's words cut deep when he cornered me after dinner one night. Voice low and sharp: "Jamie, enough with this nonsense. The stores are sinking fast, and you're the only one who can save them. Step up or step aside." His eyes were hard, like he was ready to disown me if I didn't comply. At a family reunion, my sister found her moment to humiliate me. As relatives gathered, she loudly whispered to a cousin right in front of me, "At least I have a real career. Jamie's still wasting time on his art, living like a ghost." The whole room fell silent, eyes flicking to me like I was some failed joke. I could feel my face burning, the sting worse than any slap. Bruised in more ways than one, I fled to the garage that night. Mia had given me a flashlight and a notebook to document everything. The air was thick with dust and oil, and crates were stacked high. I pulled open one to find yellowed letters tied with a cracked leather ribbon, their ink smudged but still legible. One letter mentioned a vault beneath the house, guarded by traps no one can bypass. Another crate held an old WW radio, its dials frozen, and a locked metal chest stamped with an insignia I'd never seen before. I cross-referenced it with a map Mia found tucked inside a dusty book in the library, Reynolds' Archive, which showed tunnels running beneath the neighborhood, confirming the journal's hints. Then, out of nowhere, the garage door creaked open. I froze, heart pounding. It was Mom, unannounced and looking around suspiciously. She peeked behind boxes, muttering, "What's he up to now?" I squeezed behind a workbench, holding my breath until she left, still grumbling about kids these days. That moment made everything feel dangerously close to falling apart. Juggling day jobs only made things worse. Once, during a delivery, a jealous coworker shoved me hard after a minor collision, and I hid the fresh bruises beneath long sleeves. No one could know how much I was struggling, but every coded letter I found, every strange artifact I cataloged, felt like pieces of a puzzle bigger than me. Mia sent me a photo of a leaked email chain showing mysterious shipments tied to Reynolds' property, making the danger feel even more real. Despite the fear, the family pressure, and the bruises, I kept going, knowing that uncovering the truth was the only way forward, even if I had to do it alone. The moment Mia's partial report went live, things started falling apart in ways I couldn't have imagined. She thought she was careful, but that one photo, showing a crate stamped with those Cold War symbols, slipped through. The next day, I noticed a man sitting at the diner, eyes locked on me, the whole time, his cheap suit looking out of place in our small town. I heard from Mrs. Turner next door that Mr. Delgado, the antiques dealer known for shady ties, had been asking around about the Reynolds property. One afternoon, I saw Delgado lurking near the garage, pretending to check out an old car, but clearly waiting for something or someone. It wasn't just me. The whole neighborhood felt a shift, like a storm was brewing. At home, the pressure only grew heavier. My sister suddenly started acting different, more secretive. One night, I saw her sneak out just after dark, slipping into a black sedan with tinted windows. A few days later, while at the grocery store, I overheard her on the phone talking about closing a deal and buyers from out of town. I was stunned, but the real proof came when I spotted her near the old warehouse on the edge of town. She was meeting Tony Russo, the mobster everyone warns about. I watched from the shadows as she handed him a thick envelope. I hadn't imagined my own sister could betray me like that, trying to sell out the treasure's location for cash. That moment hit me harder than any threat. Fania wasn't immune to pressure either. After one long night sorting through Reynolds' scattered papers in the garage, she confessed her torment. She told me how a man in a dark suit showed up at her office, slipping her an envelope thick with money to kill the story. She wrestled with it. She needed the job, and the money was tempting. She said she thought about quitting, just walking away from the whole mess to protect herself and me, but she couldn't. If I walk away, they win, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her crisis made me realize this wasn't just a hunt for lost artifacts anymore. It was a fight against something much darker. Then came the night my apartment was broken into. I woke up to the sound of glass breaking and heavy footsteps. Whoever came knew exactly what to steal: my laptop, the one with all our research, encrypted files, photos of coded journals. The place was ransacked. Drawers pulled out, papers torn, notes I'd carefully kept scattered and ruined. The police said it was a professional job, no random robbery. That night confirmed how deep this went. In the hospital, as Reynolds slowly recovered, he revealed what we hadn't realized. The treasure wasn't just relics or artifacts, it was evidence. He showed me a battered folder with documents and witness statements tying city officials to corrupt deals and illegal land grabs. Some signatures were familiar faces from our town's elite. This is why they want control, he said, not for history, but to silence the truth. That changed everything. What started as a mystery about hidden artifacts turned into a dangerous battle for justice. Every day after, I felt the weight of betrayal, threats, and secrets. The enemies weren't just outsiders, but people I once trusted. This wasn't just about treasure anymore. It was survival. When we finally pried open that rusted chest in the garage, the contents surprised me. Instead of gold or gems, there were piles of fragile papers, reports, letters, and photographs that looked like evidence from a secret investigation. One of the first documents I pulled out was a typed memo with official letterhead showing correspondence between local government officials. It detailed agreements allowing a company to dump waste near the river where kids in town often swam. I remember sitting on the cold concrete floor, my hands trembling as I realized the illnesses I'd heard neighbors whisper about, the unexplained cancers, respiratory problems, were all connected to this hidden crime. I found a photo of a dilapidated factory leaking chemicals right into the water, marked with notes in the margins by Mr. Reynolds himself. What shocked me was seeing the names of businessmen linked to my father's rivals, some of them close family friends. It was like the tangled web of corruption was sitting right on top of our family. One evening, while sorting through the papers, I uncovered a worn diary wrapped in brittle cloth. It was written by a woman who survived a community displaced during World War II, someone who had lived in hiding beneath the town. The diary told stories of families forced from their homes, secret shelters, and the desperate efforts to protect artifacts from being stolen or destroyed. There was a detailed account of a massacre that had been hushed up for decades, an entire group wiped out to make way for development projects. As I read her words handwritten in faded ink about the night the soldiers came, I felt chills. The diary described screams muffled in the dark, and the chilling silence afterward, a story no one ever spoke of but that seemed etched into the ground beneath our feet. I traced my fingers over a crudely drawn map inside, showing tunnels beneath the town. The same tunnels mentioned in the Reynolds archive I'd found earlier. At home, things started falling apart. I overheard my mother late one night, pacing in the kitchen, voice cracking as she argued with my father. She was scared and torn, whispering about how this truth could ruin everything we'd worked for. Once, I caught her staring long and hard at the diary before stuffing it back into its hiding spot. Eyes haunted. Meanwhile, my sister grew colder and sharper, her usual polished smile never reaching her eyes, when we clashed about exposing the truth. One afternoon, she snapped at me during dinner, "This obsession with old ghosts will destroy the family." But I caught her flicking through a photo from the diary, a flicker of doubt in her gaze. Then Mia's article hit the press. I remember scrolling through my phone at work, seeing comments flood in, some supportive, others angry and threatening. The night my apartment was ransacked stands out vividly. Drawers overturned, papers scattered, but worst of all, my laptop was gone, the one holding all my notes and decrypted messages. A week later, I spotted my sister slipping into a back room of a shady antique shop I'd heard was tied to criminals. When I confronted Mia, she confessed with tears in her eyes that someone powerful had offered her money to kill the story. She was terrified of losing her job, but she also hated the idea of leaving me alone in this mess. All of it, those secrets, the betrayals, the threats, was real. The diary's final, haunting entry spoke of a massacre that had been buried by deals and silence. My family's businesses had profited by covering it up, trading silence for land and power. Holding that truth in my hands, knowing the lives ruined to keep it hidden, changed everything. This was no longer just about treasure. It was about justice, about honoring those forgotten, and about finally standing up to the shadows that had controlled my town and my family for too long. When we finally descended into the underground vault beneath Mr. Reynolds' garage, every sound echoed in the tight, dusty tunnels. The walls were damp, streaked with mold, and crumbling in places. At one point, a chunk of the ceiling collapsed behind us, sending dust into the air and blocking our exit. I remember how my heart nearly stopped as I clawed at the rubble with shaking hands until we cleared just enough space to squeeze through. The stale air was heavy and cold, and water dripped steadily from cracks above, making the floor slick and treacherous. I slipped once, nearly falling face first into a shallow pool of murky water. Mr. Reynolds, though weak from illness, was steady, guiding us with his flashlight and occasionally warning about the old traps that still guarded the vault. One trap I narrowly avoided was a rusted spike hidden under loose stones. If I hadn't paused to test the floor with a metal rod, I could have been seriously injured. As we ventured deeper, I suddenly heard voices low and rough coming from ahead. Peering around a bend, I saw men unloading crates stamped with strange symbols I'd seen before on documents and in Mr. Reynolds' journal. One of them was using a tablet, rapidly typing coded messages. My pulse raced. I pulled out a worn photocopy of the diary pages, showing them the evidence that this wasn't just treasure, but proof of crimes and corruption tied to powerful people. At first, they laughed, mocking me as a fool. But when I showed them pictures from the diary, photos of town officials shaking hands with shady figures and documents linking them to illegal land deals, their faces changed. They hesitated, and before tension could explode, loud sirens pierced the air. Mia had called the police after secretly tracking these men, putting her career on the line. The police raid was chaotic. I stood nearby, watching mercenaries scramble to hide weapons and loot, while officers secured the tunnels. Later, in court, the fight over ownership began. The land was legally my family's, but the town and government argued the artifacts belonged to the public, especially given the environmental damage revealed in the documents. My sister seized the moment, meeting with slick lawyers and known antique dealers who offered her quick cash. I once caught her sneaking out late at night to meet a man linked to a local crime syndicate, whispering urgently into her phone. That betrayal stung deeply. She was willing to sell our family's legacy for money. Meanwhile, my father's business came under harsh scrutiny. News leaked about investigations into his dealings with some of the corrupt officials named in the papers we uncovered. Our family gatherings grew tense and silent. My mother, once resigned and quiet, shocked me by speaking out at town meetings. I remember her voice trembling but fierce as she demanded justice for the community and pushed for environmental reforms. It was like seeing a new side of her, a woman finally ready to fight for what was right. The public attention brought praise and danger. Reporters hailed me as a hero, but threats followed. Two strange cars parked outside our home. Anonymous notes slipped under our door. I leaned on Mr. Reynolds and a small circle of friends to start a foundation aimed at preserving our town's history and protecting its environment. The foundation became a beacon of hope, proving that even after years of secrecy and betrayal, we could make a difference. At the town ceremony honoring my efforts, I saw my family's mixed emotions clearly. My sister forced a tight smile. My mother's eyes shone with tears of pride, and my father avoided my gaze. Even then, as applause filled the air, I knew the documents held secrets still hidden, mysteries waiting to unravel that could change everything once more.